welcome to Cross Circle Squared. I am Benny Grickman, and this is TouchPad, your daily video game news show where we break down the 3 most important stories of the day in an easily listenable format for your commute, your lunch break, or wherever else you'd like to listen. First up on today's dock is Helldivers 2, and Helldivers just isn't slowing down. Last week we talked about how the concurrent player counts the game is receiving has doubled any Sony-published game on Steam. But it wasn't over yet. Just this weekend, the game hit a new peak of 386,000 concurrent players, beating hugely marketed AAA live service titles and single-player titles. It beat Starfield, it beat Destiny 2, it's beaten Skyrim, Payday 2, it's beaten Fall Guys. I mean, that already, in of itself, was a huge surprise. This is a AAA-sized game, sure, but the hype and the marketing the game saw prior to release was really nothing to the size of what we're seeing right now. And that was incredible to watch. But the democracy fighters weren't done yet when yesterday the game hit a new record of 409,000. And that's more than Grand Theft Auto 5 ever saw in concurrent players on Steam. So, does that mean that Helldivers 2 is more successful than GTA 5 or Starfield or Destiny? No, GTA 5 is still the most profitable piece of entertainment of all time. But proportionally, I think you might be able to argue that, except obviously maybe some breakout hits like Lethal Company or Power World. I mean, this is a game that could have been console exclusive at one point, and that is a huge win. So the only smaller games that really I'd argue are bigger successes proportionally, I mean, maybe you have your Power World, Terraria, that kind of thing. But even if you look at the SteamDB charts, if you take those out and you look at this kind of double A-ish segment, especially if you're looking at, big publishers publishing what I think most people would have prior to launch classified as a smaller release, it's doing great, right? Above it, you really only have those breakout hits, like I mentioned, that are doing crazy well, Power World especially, and a couple free games, and then the really, really big games. You have like your Apex Legends or Counter-Strike, that kind of thing. I mean, this is a $40 published game that was published by a console maker, and that prior to its launch, again, it kind of seemed like a smaller release. So, in summary, I think it really has just destroyed expectations in that department. I think it's also fair to say, though, that it has destroyed expectations that the devs had for it, since the launch of this game, server-wise, has been pretty rough. Players are dealing with server stability issues, sync issues, and of course it has its fair share of bugs, but the biggest issue is just server capacity. So many people want to play this game, and in order to make the game just at least playable for some people, the game's developer, Arrowhead, had to cap the server player counts to not completely degrade the experience for everyone. But this has just led to what I imagine are thousands of people desperate to try this game, only ending up smacked in the face with a server at capacity message. In that case, I think it's fair to say that Helldivers is struggling from success. Beyond just Steam player counts, I mean, the game is number 1 on the PlayStation Store for the US at least, and when players do get in, they're trying to leave their game idle just to be able to save their spot and not risk being caught by the server cap when they get back home. And I mean, many people all over gaming circles are trying their hardest to get in and fight for galactic democracy. Now, in a lot of cases, when a game is met with server issues and capacity problems, it's seen as a really big issue. I think back to Payday 3's launch issues that we talked about the other day, and that really didn't go over well, as you can tell by Starbreeze's financials. However, with Helldivers 2, it seemed to be much more positive. If anything, it's sort of our fault that this game is so popular. Neither Sony nor Arrowhead probably could have ever seen this level of success coming, so it really isn't an issue of bad server management or anything like we've seen with a lot of other live service games. It really just is an issue of too many people trying to play, and so many of us enjoying it. So, with all the negativity usually found at least, in games discourse circles, especially when a game like this releases and there are issues similar to this, I'm very happy to find that it's actually been pretty positive for a change. Hopefully, Sony will see the benefit of games going cross-platform and will shift their ideology to give us some more day-and-date PC releases, especially since after that financial news last week where Sony cut the estimated console sales for the fiscal year by about 4 million, and since that, we have seen about $10 billion in value wiped off of Sony's market worth. Sony is also dealing with lower margins and some analyst trepidation. So while Helldivers 2 is a huge success, Sony will be trying to shore up their finances in the future. For our second story, we go to the Switch 2, where we have some news, some rumors. It was previously reported that the console would be releasing later this year. It now seems not to be the case, as reported by multiple outlets, Eurogamer and VGC, as well as later on corroborated by Bloomberg. It seems that the Switch will not be launching this year. It seems to be launching for a Q1 2025 launch now. Eurogamer pointed out, which I think is important to know, that that's still in the current fiscal year for Nintendo, just not the current calendar year. So for us, it seems like a big change. You're releasing 2024 and now you're technically in 2025, but really it's just a few months and it's still in that same year for the finances. So to Nintendo, I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, VGC spoke to a few developer sources and they claimed to be working on Switch 2 releases, and they kind of backed that up, and Bloomberg, of course, backed that story up as well. So if you kind of take everything here, I think this is probably pretty likely to be true. And my radar at least says yes. I'm not an insider or anything. I don't have any new information, but I think this does make sense. It gives Nintendo some time to figure out a schedule of first and third party releases for the platform, especially when you think back to the Switch 1. I mean, they really only had like 2 or 3 games worth playing at launch. I mean, there was Breath of the Wild and I guess 1-2 Switch, sort of, if you're that kind of person. Okay, it kind of really only had one worthwhile game on release, to be honest. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Nintendo will be trying to assure that they have something worthwhile to give the console a nice launch sales boost. With this news, Nintendo's shares fell a little bit, about 9%, but same with that poor Sony financial news. It's something to watch, not necessarily something to worry about, at least as a consumer. For our last story, we have some developing drama surfacing about the Disco Elysium dev Zaum's layoffs last week. This story summary comes mainly from game developer, but there are a few sources here. Sports Illustrated Video Games reported on this. VGC 24/7 also did, so I'm going to leave those links all below. Last week, it was reported that the developer was laying off about 25% of its staff. We now know that to be confirmed to be around 24 people in total. And following these layoffs, a few members of the Zaum writers team spoke to SI's Video Games, and as well as VG 24/7. They spoke about the layoffs, and they said that a lot of projects have been canceled, and now the company is kind of strife with overworking, crunch, burnout, and conflict. Game developer put it that the company seems essentially completely broken. Apparently, a lot of this comes from that People Make Games doc that I shared last week, where when it was originally released, the doc spread like wildfire, and it changed a lot of the way that Zaum functioned, in part at least leading to this environment of overall hostility. On Twitter, we have seen some insight. Chris Bratt, who is the main journalist writing and hosting that doc, as well as the main driving force behind People Make Games, took to Twitter, talking about how the doc has been overall seen in the Disco Elysium community at large, since when you're looking at it from the surface, you could kind of go away with the impression that it's the doc's fault for these project cancellations, the layoffs, and these conditions at Zaum. Though Argo Tulik, one of the writers to speak out about the layoffs, did clarify, and he said that he personally doesn't blame PMG since they were just after the truth. He puts it that they were not what was after convenient, right? They were after the entire truth. And overall, I think that's a good read of this situation. Overall, if PMG wasn't taking a kind of an even-handed look at this, I think that would be kind of against their whole mission and their goal as a journalistic operation, right? You want to try to be as unbiased as possible, even though that's really impossible, but you at least want to be even-handed in how you report, and I think the doc does do that well. Though, like I said when I first talked about this whole situation, it is very complex, and I could not summarize everything in a news block as short as the ones that we use for this show. So I'm going to leave a lot of links below if you want to take a look. If you're at all interested in Disco Elysium or you want to hear more about it, I really recommend reading through that. It is quite the complex situation. It's intensely interesting, but also very sad at the same time. All right, well, that is the news for today. I hope you enjoyed. Yesterday, we released a podcast talking about Alan Wake 1 to bridge the gap between Alan Wake 2 and our next series, which is now confirmed to be Silent Hill. So keep a lookout for that last video and the Silent Hill releases in the future. Okay, as always, I'm Benny Gerkman. This is Cross Circle Squared, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!